talking panheads tonight. Look at that 58 behind me. No pan left behind. Get your shirt. Okay, here we go.
Tonight,
the man, Tom Jones.
Tonight's about panhead history, my favorite thing to talk about. And a lot of people don't know, as I've seen on the internet as of the last few days.
The interwebs?
Yeah, the difference between all of your panheads. So we're going to do a little fun video about all 8 generations of the panhead.
All 8 generations. Okay.
You might think to yourself,
here we go.
There was 8 different panheads?
Look at this. We've got the whole gamut here.
That's the full gamut. This is the full Monty.
And that's a cocktail over
That's
there.
my cocktail. You will always see it somewhere in the frame, usually.
That is my cocktail right there.
We're going to start in the first year of the Panhead, 1948, one of the greatest years ever, because that was the year the Panhead was brought to market. Stokes me out just thinking about it. Almost brings a tear to my eye, actually.
What made the Panhead different than a knucklehead, besides the beautiful thing on the top that we all love and cherish and cook our eggs in the morning?
Harley had been trying to get away from the cast iron head, which did not dissipate heat very well. Like your average knucklehead runs at around 400 degrees. That's when it's hot. 400 to as high as 450.
That's what I cook my pizzas at.
Your average panhead at high operating temperature runs around 260 to 280. So much cooler.
So panheads are cooler.
And by definition, yes, they are. Which is a great point, Eric. Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the weeds here.
1948 panheads are unique in one aspect, and that's that we have this casting here. You see?
Okay.
1948. This is a rear, so it's 2, and the fronts say 1. So 1948, 1 is a front, 1948, 2 is a rear.
Or there's that big word at the bottom that says rear, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But this was just to help the foundry. Who knows why they did it? I don't give a shit one way or the other. But this is your date batch. Okay, so we have a C8. So we know ABC, that's 3. That's March of 1948. So this is a panhead that was produced in the early part of 1948. So this might have gone on a mid to late year 48 because there was over 13,000 panheads produced in 1948. It was the highest production year of
all
panheads.
I can see is your fucking hand in there.
Okay, sorry about that. All right.
I mean, people love your tattoos. A lot of the ladies out there are
Do you like that tattoo?
in them.
The most?
Oh, look at that.
Is that a panhead?
But,
all right. So the big advancements in the panhead were aluminum head, a clamp-on exhaust port instead of a jam-in exhaust port, right? And although this panhead has an O-ring insert, the original panheads had a
that is not
spigot.
A 48 thing. Come on now.
Had a spigot. Oh, geez. I don't even have one on the table. This is really bad. Had a spigot that looked like that. Okay?
Look at that.
That went in there.
This an old spigot laying around.
This is actually how I take them
torched.
out. I weld this little plate on there, put a nut on there so I can back them out after I get the rivet out. So this is actually a little tech tip also. This is how This is how you get your spigots out.
We like that. We like that.
So this has been converted to an O-ring. So you see this steel insert that's for O-ring. This is what would have been in it. Okay? Exactly the same as Knucklehead.
Not with that thing. But
and it would have had a threaded...
The plumber
manifold. Okay? Then Harley chose to use soft brass inserts. And you can see here as this seat has been cut out. See these wings here?
Yeah.
That point in? See how that points in? So this seat, although looks this big, actually webs out. It has these 3 wings that stick out over 1/4 of an inch to 5/16 of an inch into the head to lock it in place as they cast around it.
So when they were casting, they set up the brass, they set up these steel things, and then they poured the aluminum around that.
They set in these 2 soft brass inserts for the seats. Those were cast in. You cannot remove them without cutting out this entire part of the head. Okay, you basically cut the whole combustion chamber out to get those out. Then there's a steel insert for the spark plug. So a lot of people see these cracks right here. And they're actually kind of superficial because the amount of material that's left here is very thin. As long as those cracks don't go under here, we'll go into that in another video. But those cracks, a lot of people see them, think that the head is damaged. But you see how much meat's there? Yep. And this crack is somewhat superficial because this steel insert for the exhaust plug, you see that star pattern there is what locks it from the torquing process of torquing the plug. There is actually a wing that sticks out, or a ring that sticks out on that insert that is this big. I'm actually going to draw it because I've had to cut these out to bathtub heads. It's actually this big, believe it or not.
That's wild.
So to get that thing out of there, you're basically cutting into the seat almost to get rid of that. So that was a huge problem, and that's why a lot of these cracks appeared,
a problem
because there's so little material between that kind of satellite dish and the steel expands and contracts at a different rate as the aluminum, and the brass expands and contracts at a different rate as the aluminum and the steel. So you have kind of like a ticking time bomb. And so as many advancements as there were going forward with the Panhead, there was kind of like a step backwards in the sense of metallurgy, right? So
all right, we're talking history.
Yeah. So we have steel inserts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steel inserts. We have a steel insert for the plug and 2 soft brass inserts. The rest of the head is 100% aluminum. Okay.
So knuckleheads were completely cast iron.
Completely cast iron, right? And so with the Panhead, they switched from having rocker shafts and arms that rode on a shaft and then a box that hung off these very precarious cantilevered diving boards, as they're often referred to. Mm-hmm. You have, now they were like, those broke all the time. That was a kind of a geometric and engineering nightmare. So we're just going to bolt the pillow block and the rocker arm down to the most thick and solid part of the head. And that's what they did here with these 4 studs. And they bolt the tower on like that. And they thought they had, in all intents and purposes, this was a very huge advancement, but it was, in the 18 years that they produced the Panhead, it proved to be fairly problematic on its own because you have tons of load going this way, tons of pressure going this way. You have a brass top, a steel bottom, a steel shaft. There were all kinds of things happening here that wore these out, right? And we can go into that in another video. But what's cool is they kind of solved the problem of just breaking heads for no reason, right? So then you have the knucklehead rocker tins were constantly leaking. They were like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make this giant gasket surface. We're going to put a pan rocker box on it, and we're going to seal it up like that. So this was a major leap forward, right? And then what was also happening with knuckleheads was the exhaust pipe went into the port, and it would get loose, wear away the inserted port, and it would vibrate, and then it would create a crack that went all the way up and into the valve guide landing, right? So that was a huge problem with knuckleheads. So they were like, we're going to make a clamp-on exhaust spigot, and that proved to be problematic on its own because they start out really thick. I have one here that's really thick. You see how thick that one is, right? And then you see how thin they get. And then you see how worn down they get. See how thin they get there, and then
broken.
And then they just break and whatever. So it wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better, in my opinion. And so with 48, there's 2 kind of versions of the 48 head. One version does not have this dam, and then this is the secondary version with this cast-in dam. So what they were finding was as panheads were heating up and oil was being pushed through the head, they were finding that oil was running away from the intake side of the valve spring and not lubricating the valve springs very properly. So in the shop dope manuals, they were telling the dealers to put this little steel insert, and I thought I had one of them here to show you, but there was actually this little steel dam that you'd put in here, and you'd drill and tap, and you'd put a screw in there, and it would essentially do what this bridge does here. But then the later versions of the head, and as you can see, as you can see, this is a March of 48. The early versions of 48, what a lot of people don't understand is all of the 48s were produced in 47. So So most 48s early to mid-year are going to have late 47 casting numbers. So they're going to have like L7s, J7s, stuff like that, right? So, oh my God, that was 10 minutes. We haven't even got through the first head.
We set ourselves a timer.
Holy cow. All right, well, we are blowing it in terms of time, but we're just going to keep going.
Windbags over here.
Yeah. So this is the second generation of the head. This is an early 48, but it's obviously later into the production year. And then you see this dam, and what that was supposed to do was keep a bunch of oil here. And as the spring went up and down, it was supposed to kind of bounce a bunch of oil around to help lubricate the valve stem. So that was the reason why they were doing that.
We get that.
Okay, you
Now
get that.
Let's move on. What else is unique about
right.
a fucking 48 so we can move on to the next
So
thing?
48 and 49s all had this casting number. Okay?
Right.
Boom.
We got that.
Then there's the year batch. So the second version of the head is here. And this is the 50 to 54 head. Okay? And so you see that we've changed 1951, and then the front says 1952, right?
So a 49 would have had a 48 cast.
Still 48s, yeah.
Okay.
So
Then
48
in
and 49.
50.
Then in 50 to 54, to late 54, you see this head. This is the head that's run for 4 years.
50 to 54?
It is absolutely identical in every way. You can see that this is a March of 51, okay?
Okay.
This one's
You
obvious.
got to look at that number too.
And this has the actual plumber insert that's supposed to be in it. So there you go. All right, so that's what it's supposed to look like. Soft brass seats, absolutely same head, same fins, same everything, same D-rings. You can see that they have gotten rid of the dam for some reason, and I don't know why. Because they've switched to the intake oiler. So what they've done now is they've switched all their rocker arms to have an oiler that's on the arm right here, as you can see here. So now they are sending into the block oil that runs up and then drips down onto here. And there's a little passageway that's cut here in the block that helps bring oil there, so they're not as worried of it running out. Okay?
That's wild.
So that's version 2 of the head. Version 3 is our 1955 6-bolt head. Okay? So this is
6-bolt.
This is a very rare late 54 to mid-year 55 head. We went over this in a different video that we did, but this is the first version of the 55 head. And the thing that makes it different is we have the cast-in O-ring intake spigot. So they got rid of the plumber manifold, and they come and have a O-ring intake spigot, and it's cast into the head. So no longer are you putting an insert in. But everything else is the same except for one. There's kind of two kind of interesting dissimilarities. You see soft brass seats, the cast-in plug hole. All these are cast in. But for some reason, this insert has been converted to some sort of like time cert, right, that they do afterwards, because you see there's no cast-in star there. So I don't know if they did that because they were getting cracking or something like that, but you only see it on this version of the head. It's actually really strange because look, here's the next version. Here's the next version of the head, and they've gone away from it. Well, here it is by the exhaust, right? And you can see that they've gone away from it again. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on with there. There's really nothing, no literature about it or anything like that, but you can see that in this version of the head, the third version, you see the Dash 55, okay? They started, this is in August of 54, okay? So they're producing the 55s in 1954. So this is an early version. By December of 54, they stopped doing the 6-hole. So if you get a 12-4, after that, you're never going to see another.
This is what we talk about, the D-rings.
Yeah.
And the,
Exactly. You're never going to see another 6-hole head after 12-4. Because by 55, they have changed it, okay? And I have 55 heads up there that I could show you. But anyways, you've got the O-ring, and you've got... what are the other differences? Nothing. That's it. That's the massive difference there. Mm-hmm. They haven't changed the fin size or anything like that. They're doing basically everything the same, except they decided they were going to increase the D-ring thickness, so they need less holes. That turned out to be problematic, so they shifted gears. Okay. All right. Then they started also the factory porting, and you can see that this head has the beginnings of the factory porting. You see how this is cut away and then flowed a little bit? That is what Harley was charging an extra $15 for.
$15.
There's literally no difference, all right? Okay. That one's probably been ported though. These are old and they've been messed around with. So, or no, that's a plumber thing. So those weren't ported at all. So then you have the next version of the head, which is the 55 with the 12 holes. Okay, so this is the exact same head, but now you have 12 holes, and it's identical in every way, except it's a 12-hole version of the head. Then you have the fifth version of the head, which is a 56. So you have a dash 5.6, and all they did was just cover the 5 with a giant 6. Okay, that was their thing. This runs until 1958. Okay, and this is the last version of the outside casting number. So this is the last head that you can actually see the casting numbers without having to take the box off. Wow. Okay, and so this head is completely identical to these last two versions, except it has a 5.6. Then it'll have a badge that only goes up to December of 57, and by that time they switch to the 58 big fin head, which we'll go over next. But you can see it's totally identical in every way. They've changed some of these fins a little bit, but for the most part, the casting is identical. Then they go to what we affectionately refer to as a big fin panhead, which has a dash 5.6 casting inside the head, but it starts in 1958. This is a November of 1958. You can see very clearly there. And what you have is you have a much bigger fin cooling capacity. If you just look at these two heads
for the month.
Yeah, if you look at these two heads, you see how much bigger the fins are. That's why they call these the big fins. You see, like on this head, even though these are two different heads, look at how little fin there is around there, and look at how much fin you see here. So these are big fins. So they say
tattooed.
They say 30% more cooling capacity with these heads. Okay?
It's really about that.
And then, so those went inside, but other than that, everything else is the same. You have soft brass inserts. You have a slightly different style exhaust port because the way it's cut into the head, but it's identical. You have the cast-in intake port, and these are factory ported. So you see how smooth it is?
Wow, that looks way nicer.
Yeah. So from the factory, these have been sandblasted, but from the factory, you would have seen a little bit of this same kind of like swirl mark because they use a little flap disc, right?
Yeah.
To do it. So you'll see that in there. So this is the first big fin head, and this ran from 58 to 62. Then the second to last version of the head is the late 62 head, which looks like a 63 to 65 head, except for one main difference. It has the boss for the inevitable outside oiler conversion. So there it is. But it's undrilled. And the reason you know this is a legitimate 62 head is because it has the diagonal feed port right there for oil coming from the cylinders. So that's a pretty critical thing because you could take like a 63 and you could weld it up, but then you'd have to re-drill all this. So this is...
you think they were like getting ready for that, or why would
well, yeah, they knew they were going to do it. So they started the casting right, but they still produced 62s with a blank boss and drilled them.
That's wild.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
So they were kind of getting ready, but they were like, maybe don't do it yet.
And then in 63 to 65...
Because no one wants to see that outside oiler. They're hideous.
Exactly. And you have the final head. And contrary to popular belief, you can't run 63 to 65 heads on any other panhead without sending oil in a different way to the top end. So the idea that these are just
other parts
regular panheads is false. So when you see the dash 56... that doesn't mean it works on a 56. This only works on 63 to 65 engines, okay? All of these panheads can go on any panhead like this 58 or like this 61 or like that 48 without any modification. So you can run a 48, you can run a 50, you can run a 55, you can run a 56, you can run a 58, all on these panheads. But the second you get to 63... you have no more oil going through the cylinder. So now if you bolted this on a 58, you'd be sending oil nowhere. All right, so you'd have to find a way. You'd either have to bring it from the pump, bring it from the cam cover, bring it from somewhere else, and send it into this vane. Okay, so the thing about the 63 that's unique is you have the boss for the outside oiler. Okay, you have no feed from the cylinder, and but you do have the same return, so you're still returning oil through the same capacity. Right? See? Feeding through cylinder, no hole. Fitting there, no fitting. But other than that, the head is identical.
This is the wildest thing.
Yeah.
They had that there.
All the way to 65, and that is your last and final tidbit. And that right there, my friends, is all 8 Panheads.
There you have it. Panheads.
Celebrating with a little
No
V&T.
pan left behind.